The Silent Hunter. High Ambassador Vilex adjusted his crystalline ceremonial robes as he gazed through the observation dome of the Meridian Empire's flagship. The Earth delegation would arrive any moment, and everything had to be perfect. The war had dragged on far too long, costing both sides dearly. These peace talks represented their best chance at ending the bloodshed. "Your Eminence," his aide whispered, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence, "the human shuttle approaches." Vilex monitored the small craft's approach with both his natural and cybernetic senses. Simple, utilitarian design, typical human efficiency. No ornamental features, no ceremonial markings. Just function over form. He'd learned to respect that about them. The shuttle docked with barely a sound. A good sign, Vilex thought. The humans were being careful, respectful. Perhaps this wouldn't be as difficult as the War Council had predicted. The airlock cycled, and 3 humans emerged. 2 males in formal diplomatic attire, and between them, a female in simple gray clothing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Something about her made Vilex's threat receptors tingle. "Welcome aboard the luminous path," Vilex began, spreading his 4 arms in the traditional greeting. "I am High Ambassador Vilex. We are honored by your presence." The older male stepped forward. "Ambassador James Chen, Earth Diplomatic Corps. With me are Security Advisor Marcus Webb and..." He hesitated almost imperceptibly, Special Consultant Sarah Chen. Vilex's translator stumbled over the woman's title. Special Consultant? It didn't match any known human diplomatic rank. She stood perfectly still, her gray eyes scanning the room with mechanical precision. Those eyes, they reminded him of something he'd seen in training simulations. Targeting systems. "Please," Vilex gestured toward the conference chamber, "shall we begin?" The talks progressed smoothly at first. Both sides presented their terms, made the expected counteroffers, engaged in the diplomatic dance that Vilex had performed countless times before. But throughout it all, Sarah Chen remained silent, watching. It wasn't until the 3rd hour that Vilex realized what had been bothering him. She hadn't moved. Not once. No shifting of weight, no unnecessary gestures, no human fidgeting that his species found so distracting. She was as still as a targeting laser. "Perhaps," Ambassador Chen was saying, "if we could discuss the demilitarized zone proposal dash." Sarah Chen spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but carried an authority that silenced the room. "They're stalling." Vilex felt his chromatophores flutter with surprise. "I assure you dash. 3 battle groups have entered the system in the past hour," she continued, eyes never leaving his face. "They're using the star's radiation to mask their approach. Old trick. Effective against most scanning systems." A slight smile. "Not against human ones." The room erupted in chaos. Vilex's aides frantically consulted their data screens while security personnel moved to secure the exits. But Sarah Chen hadn't moved an inch. "How?" Vilex demanded. "How could you possibly dash?" "You're not the only ones who brought backup to a peace talk," she replied. "The difference is, ours didn't break protocol." That's when Vilex remembered where he'd seen eyes like hers before. In the footage of the Battle of Proxima, where a single human sniper had held off an entire Meridian assault force for 6 days. The shot that finally ended the battle had come from 3 kilometers away, through a dust storm, hitting a target the size of a credit chip. "You're her," he whispered. "The ghost of Proxima." Sarah Chen's smile never reached her eyes. "That's an old name. I've earned a few others since then." She stood, fluid and graceful as Mercury. "You have exactly 15 minutes to recall your battle groups and resume honest negotiations. After that, well." She glanced at Ambassador Chen, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "After that," she continued, "I start doing what I do best. And trust me, Ambassador Villex, you don't want to see what a human sniper considers their best work. Villex knew the reports. Impossible shots made possible. Entire operations disrupted by a single operator who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. The human who had single-handedly changed how the Meridian Empire approached ground warfare. You wouldn't, he began. This is a diplomatic dash. 14 minutes, she interrupted. An ambassador? While your security teams are trying to figure out how to contain me, they might want to check on your flagship's primary reactor control rod. The one that's been transmitting targeting data for the past 3 hours. Villex felt his blood run cold. She'd already begun her work, right under their sensors, while everyone was distracted by diplomatic pleasantries. The stories didn't do her justice. Get me the War Council, he barked at his aide. Priority channel. Sarah Chen sat back down, resuming her perfect stillness. 13 minutes, she said softly. Tick-tock. The battle groups were recalled with 11 minutes to spare. The peace talks resumed, but this time with genuine intent on both sides. And throughout it all, Sarah Chen sat watching, a living reminder of humanity's capacity for both precision and destruction. As the final treaties were being signed, Villex couldn't help but ask her one question. Why show yourself at all? Why not remain in the shadows? Those gray eyes met his. Because sometimes the most effective shot is the one you don't have to take. Sometimes just knowing the sniper is out there is enough. She stood to leave. Remember that, Ambassador. Peace through precision. The Meridian Empire signed the peace accord that day. And in the years that followed, whenever some young hothead in the War Council suggested breaking the treaty, someone would always remind them of the human sniper who had won a battle without firing a shot. Sarah Chen's reputation had done what no weapon could, it had made peace the most tactical option. The Ghost Protocol. Supreme War Strategist Kexari stalked through the holographic war room of the Meridian Empire's military headquarters, his iridescent scales shifting between shades of frustration. The latest battle simulations floated around him, each one ending in the same impossible way, defeat by a single human operative. Run it again, he commanded, all 4 hands clenched in frustration. Adjust for temporal variance. The simulation flickered to life. A Meridian strike force, perfectly positioned around a human mining colony. Standard protocol called for overwhelming force, shock and awe. But that doctrine had died the day they'd learned about Sarah Chen. In the simulation, the strike force moved with perfect stealth, using every countermeasure known to Meridian science. They'd learned from their mistakes. No radio communications. No neural networks. No electronic signatures. They moved like ghosts. 3 seconds into the simulation, a critical systems officer's head exploded into pixels. Pause. Kexari roared. Analysis. His youngest analyst, Vixtel, stepped forward. Sir, according to the data from our last 3 encounters, the human sniper doesn't rely on electronic signatures. He hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously, she reads the wind. The wind, Kexari repeated flatly. We have the most advanced stealth technology in known space, and you're telling me she uses the wind? Not just the wind, sir. Temperature variations. Dust patterns. The way local wildlife responds to movement. She turns the environment itself into a sensor network. Kexari stared at the frozen simulation, at the perfect shot that had somehow threaded through their defenses. The humans called it, reading the battlefield. His species had always relied on technology to do that for them. Perhaps that had been their first mistake. What about the new combat protocols, he asked. Vixtel brought up another display. We've completely redesigned our approach based on known human sniper tactics. Random movement patterns. No predictable command structures. We even developed new armor with irregular shapes to break up targeting profiles. And she adapted faster than we could implement the changes. The humans have a saying, yesterday's innovation is today's predictability. Keksari felt his scales ripple with dark amusement. The humans had turned their own adaptability against them. Every new protocol, every countermeasure, just gave her more information about how they thought and fought. "Show me the Gamma Site incident," he ordered. The holographics shifted to display a Meridian forward base. Everything had been done by the book, random patrol patterns, sensor nets, even atmospheric distortion fields to break up sight lines. They'd thought themselves invisible. The footage showed a quiet night shift. Nothing unusual. Then, one by one, in precise 15-minute intervals, critical system failures began. Power regulators. Communications. Defense grids. No shots fired, no alarms triggered. Just careful, surgical strikes at weak points they hadn't even known existed. She never aimed for the obvious targets, Vixtel explained. She studied the base's maintenance schedules, identified critical but seemingly minor systems. Each shot was calculated to create a cascade effect. How many casualties? That's the thing, sir. None. She disabled a fully staffed military base without a single death. The psychological impact was more devastating than a massacre would have been, Keksari finished. She showed us our vulnerability without giving us martyrs. He turned to face the assembled war council. We've been approaching this wrong. We're not fighting a sniper. We're fighting a tactician who happens to use a rifle. Sir. Think about it. Every shot serves multiple purposes. Physical damage, yes, but also psychological impact, tactical advantage, and most importantly, education. She's teaching us. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Each engagement wasn't just a battle, it was a lesson. Every time they adapted, they were really just participating in her combat curriculum. New protocol, Keksari announced. Effective immediately. All forces are to operate under the assumption that they are being observed at all times. Not by censors, not by spies, but by someone who has learned to read the universe like a book. Sir, that's paranoid. No, Keksari corrected, that's respect. We're up against someone who turned warfare into a language and every shot into a sentence. It's time we learn to read. He turned back to the frozen simulation, studying the perfect shot that had ended it. Update the combat doctrine. Full revision. I want every officer to understand what we're really facing. This isn't about technology or tactics anymore. It's about learning to think like them. Like humans. Like hunters. The old kind. The ones who learn to track prey by reading broken twigs and displaced pebbles. We've relied on our technology for so long, we've forgotten that combat is older than computers. As if to emphasize his point, the lights in the war room flickered briefly. Every officer froze, suddenly aware of how exposed they felt. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, Sarah Chen was out there, teaching her deadly lessons to anyone wise enough to learn them. One more thing, Keksari added. Send a message to High Command. Tell them we need to reconsider our position on the peace talks. Some enemies are best kept as teachers. The war room hummed with nervous energy as his orders were carried out. The Meridian Empire was about to learn a lesson that humanity had known for millennia. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the biggest weapon, but the one with the patience to use it perfectly. The student's game. The holding cell aboard the Meridian battlecruiser Eternal Vigilance was unlike any other in the fleet. No neural suppressors, no energy barriers, just old-fashioned physical restraints and reinforced walls. The perfect place to hold a human, or so they thought. The prisoner sat calmly in the center of the cell, his Federation maintenance uniform dusty but somehow still presentable. According to his credentials, he was David Mitchell, civilian technician. According to Meridian intelligence, he was something far more interesting. Intelligence Officer Zyra watched him through the observation window, all three of her hearts beating in an anxious rhythm. He hasn't moved in 6 hours, she reported to Supreme War Strategist Keksari. Not even to stretch. Just like her, Keksari noted. The same stillness. The prisoner chose that moment to look directly at them through the supposedly one-way glass. You know, he called out conversationally, your ventilation system has a slight whistle in the upper registers. Might want to get that checked. Zyra felt her scales ripple with unease. The cell was soundproofed. There was no way he could have heard them. Unless. Let me speak with him, Keksari ordered. The interview room was spartanly furnished, 1 table, 2 chairs. No recording devices. They'd learned that lesson the hard way after 3 previous interrogation rooms had their systems mysteriously malfunction. Mr. Mitchell, Keksari began, settling his bulk into the reinforced chair. Or do you prefer a different name? Mitchell's fine. The human smiled. Though I suspect you have other names in mind. Our intelligence suggests you have connections to Sarah Chen. Sarah Chen. Mitchell looked thoughtful. The sniper. The one who's been giving your empire so much trouble. He chuckled. What makes you think I know anything about her? Your posture, for one. You move like she does. Or rather, you don't move, like she doesn't move. That kind of stillness isn't natural. It's trained. Maybe I just have good posture. And perhaps you also have a perfectly innocent explanation for the modified communication protocols we found in your toolkit? The ones designed to piggyback targeting data through our own neural networks. Mitchell's smile never wavered. I'm a maintenance technician. I work with all sorts of systems. A technician who just happened to be working near 3 separate installations before they experienced critical systems failures. All with her signature style. Coincidence can be a funny thing. Keksari leaned forward. We don't believe in coincidences anymore. Not since we met her. Help us understand. Help us learn. Something changed in Mitchell's expression, subtle, but there. Learn what? How she thinks. How humans think. Every time we adapt, she's 2 steps ahead. Every countermeasure we develop becomes another tool in her arsenal. We need to understand. Mitchell was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its casual tone. You really want to learn? Fine. Here's your first lesson. What do you think I've been doing since you brought me aboard? Keksari felt his scales turn pale. You're in a sealed cell. Am I? Or am I exactly where I need to be? Mitchell's eyes, previously warm and friendly, suddenly held that same steel-gray quality they'd seen in Sarah Chen. While you've been trying to interrogate me about her, I've been mapping your ship through vibrations in the deck plates. That ventilation whistle I mentioned? It's not a malfunction. It's deliberate, creates a specific resonance pattern that tells me exactly where I am in relation to your primary systems. Impossible. You're bluffing. 3rd deck, port side, 2 compartments from the auxiliary power core. The guard rotation changes every 4 hours, but they're sloppy on the 3rd shift, drag their feet when they're tired. Creates a distinct sound pattern. Keksari stood so quickly his chair toppled. Lock down all systems. Full security protocol. Too late. Mitchell's smile returned, sadder now. Lesson 2, sometimes the best student is actually the teacher. Sarah didn't train me. I trained her. The ship's lights flickered once, twice. In the distance, a muffled thud echoed through the hull. That would be the number 3 power coupling failing, Mitchell said conversationally. Precise shot through a maintenance access port that, according to your own schematics, doesn't exist. But I found it, mapped it, and sent the data using nothing but tapped pipes and shifted air currents. Old Earth submarines used to communicate that way, before digital technology. Amazing what you can learn from history. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Keksari's communicator erupted with frantic reports of systems failing in cascade patterns, exactly like the Gamma site incident. "She's here," Keksari whispered. "She's been here," Mitchell corrected. "Final lesson, the best trap isn't the one you set. It's the one you let them think they've set for you." The lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. When emergency power restored minimal illumination, Mitchell was gone. In his place was a small note, written in precise military script. "Thank you for taking care of my teacher. Class dismissed. SC." The Eternal Vigilance limped back to port 2 days later, its systems crippled but its crew unharmed. They found Mitchell's personnel file in their database, backdated 20 years. He had indeed been Sarah Chen's instructor at the Federation Special Operations School, long before she became the ghost that haunted Meridian nightmares. In his final report, Keksari wrote only this: "We sought to understand their methods. Instead, they taught us the price of underestimating human ingenuity." The student became the master, but the master never stopped being a student. This is how they surpass us: they never stop learning, never stop adapting. And now, neither can we. Echoes in the dark. Intelligence Analyst 3rd Class Vixna sorted through the flood of intercepted communications, her neural processors struggling to keep up with the sheer volume of data. Ever since the Eternal Vigilance incident, every mention of Sarah Chen or any human sniper activity was automatically flagged for immediate review. The latest report came from the Outer Rim colony of New Haven. Cargo shipment delayed. Environmental systems experiencing unexplained malfunctions. Request immediate technical support. To most observers, it was a routine maintenance request. But Vixna had learned to read between the lines. Environmental systems had become code for sniper activity ever since Chen had demonstrated her mastery of using atmosphere processors to mask her movements. Another one, she sub-vocalized to her superior, Commander Raxtel. Pattern matches previous incidents. Raxtel's holographic avatar materialized beside her workstation. Location: New Haven. But that's impossible, she was reported near the Centauri sector just 6 hours ago. Was she? Raxtel's avatar flickered thoughtfully. Or is that what she wanted us to think? A new alert flashed across Vixna's neural feed. Then another. And another. Reports flooding in from across Meridian space. Proxima outpost, atmospheric anomalies detected. Station Delta 9, maintenance access protocols revised. Mining Colony 7, security sweep scheduled. Standard procedure. None of them explicitly mentioned sniper activity. They didn't need to. The pattern was clear, or was it? "Sir," Vixna's voice trembled slightly, "these reports, they're coming in too fast. Too many locations. Even she can't be everywhere at once." "No," Raxtel agreed, "she can't. But her influence can be." He brought up a galactic map, highlighting each reported location. "Look at the pattern. What do you see?" Vixna studied the glowing points of light. At first, they seemed random, scattered across Meridian space. Then she saw it. They're all supply route choke points. Critical infrastructure nodes. Exactly. But notice, no actual attacks. No confirmed shots fired. Just, rumors. Whispers. Fear. Understanding dawned. She's weaponized her own reputation. More than that, Raxtel corrected. She's turned our entire intelligence apparatus against us. Every time we report a possible sighting, every time we adjust our security protocols, we're spreading her influence for her. A new message flashed priority across their screens, this one from High Command itself. All stations, cease transmission of sniper-related activity reports. New protocol enacted, Operation Silent Watch. Too late. The damage was done. Across Meridian space, every commander, every security officer, every soldier now moved with the cautious awareness that they might be in a sniper's scope at any moment. Productivity dropped as personnel doubled and tripled their security checks. Supply routes were altered, adding hours or days to delivery times. And somewhere out there, Sarah Chen might be watching. Or she might not be. The uncertainty was her greatest weapon. "Sir," Vixna asked quietly, "how do you fight an enemy who doesn't need to be present to affect your operations?" Raxtel's avatar shimmered. "That's the wrong question, analyst. The real question is, how do you fight an enemy who has turned your own paranoia into their greatest ally?" A new report caught Vixna's attention. This one was different, a personal message, slipped through their highest security channels. To Meridian High Command. From Redacted. Subject, Lesson in Economy. You've spent the last month chasing shadows. Redirecting supply lines. Doubling security. All because you thought I might be watching. Calculate the cost in resources, time, and morale. Now ask yourself, how many actual shots did I fire to achieve this? Sometimes the most effective campaign is the one where you never have to pull the trigger. Regards. SC. P.S. Your new encryption protocol has a lovely rhythm to it. Almost like music. Vixna's hands shook as she processed the implications. The entire operation, it was all psychological. Not entirely, Raxtel said grimly. There were just enough real incidents to make every false alarm credible. She played us like an instrument, using our own fears as the strings. The next day, High Command issued new standing orders. All personnel were to operate under the assumption that Sarah Chen was both everywhere and nowhere. The universe itself had become her scope, and every Meridian soldier her potential target. And in the vast darkness between the stars, a human sniper smiled, knowing that her greatest shot had been fired without ever touching her rifle. Fear, after all, traveled faster than light. The final shot. The Meridian Empire's most advanced hunting squad, the Shadow Stalkers, moved through the abandoned space station like liquid darkness. Their biomechanical enhancements had been specifically designed to counter human sniping techniques, heat signature scramblers, neural dampeners, even experimental quantum positioning systems that made their exact location impossible to calculate. Squad leader Nexvor held up a clawed hand, signaling his team to freeze. Something about the station's central atrium felt wrong. The air currents were too perfect. "She's here," he sub-vocalized through their secure channel. Pattern 7 deployment. The 12 Shadow Stalkers dispersed with practiced precision, each taking positions that had been calculated using every scrap of data they'd gathered about Sarah Chen's methodology. They'd studied her for years, analyzed every shot, every tactic. They'd even incorporated human training techniques into their program. In theory, they were the perfect counter to her abilities. A soft whistle echoed through the station, an old Earth tune about a young soldier saying goodbye to his love. "Danny boy. Targeting solution impossible," one of his soldiers reported. "Sound is coming from everywhere and nowhere." "That's because she's not trying to hide," Nexvor realized. "She's inviting us to play." The whistle stopped. A voice, calm and clear, carried through the recycled air. "You've learned well," Sarah Chen said. "Better than any before you. But you're still thinking like Meridians trying to think like humans. That's not good enough. We were created to end you," Nexvor called out. "Every aspect of our design counters your abilities." A soft chuckle. "And that's exactly why you'll fail. You're designed. I'm evolved. Big difference." One of his soldiers suddenly dropped, a perfect shot through a gap in his armor that shouldn't have existed. The angle was impossible, it would have required the bullet to curve around two separate corners. "Physics lesson," Chen's voice drifted from a new location. "Your quantum positioning systems are impressive. But they rely on the assumption that space is constant. It isn't. Gravity bends it. Heat warps it. And if you understand those principles well enough. Another shot. Another impossible angle. Another shadow stalker down. You can make the universe itself your scope. Nextwar's enhanced senses were working overtime, trying to plot her position. But every calculation ended in mathematical impossibility. She wasn't breaking their defenses, she was breaking their understanding of reality itself. Fall back, he ordered. Regroup at dash. Too late, Chen interrupted. Final exam time. The station's lights flickered, and in that moment of darkness, Nextwar understood. They weren't hunting her. This wasn't even a battle. It was a demonstration. When the lights returned, Sarah Chen stood in the center of the atrium, her simple gray clothing absorbing light just as it had during the peace talks years ago. Her rifle wasn't even raised. You want to know the real difference between us? She asked, those steel-gray eyes fixing on Nextwar. Your empire sees war as a science. Humanity remembers it as an art. You can't program instinct. You can't engineer intuition. Then why? Nextwar demanded. Why let us chase you all these years? Why teach us if we could never truly learn? Because the lesson wasn't for you. She smiled sadly. It was for your leaders. Every shot I took, every operation I disrupted, was sending them a message: no matter how advanced you become, humanity will find a way to adapt. Not through design, but through determination. She raised her rifle, not toward any of them, but toward a seemingly random point in space. Your empire needed to understand that peace wasn't just the best option, it was the only option. Because you can't win a war against an enemy who turns your every advancement into their next opportunity. The shot, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. A single round that seemed to vanish into nothing. Until every light in the station went dark. When emergency power kicked in, Sarah Chen was gone. The shadow stalkers were alive but disabled, their advanced systems locked into an endless diagnostic loop. And in high command, at that exact moment, a small caliber round materialized through a quantum entanglement field that shouldn't have been possible to breach, embedding itself in the wall exactly 1 millimeter from the high commander's head. Attached was a note. Final lesson: there's always another impossible shot. Always another way to adapt. Always another lesson to learn. The question is, have you learned enough to choose peace? Because humanity never stops teaching. Class dismissed. Sarah Chen. Human sniper, teacher of stars. The Meridian Empire renewed the peace treaty the next day. The Shadow Stalkers were reassigned as peacekeeping liaisons, teaching both Meridians and humans the lessons they'd learned about adaptation and understanding. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, a human sniper continues her patrol, not as a warrior, but as a reminder that the most powerful weapon humanity possesses isn't technology or tactics, it's the infinite capacity to learn, adapt, and evolve. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the shot you take, but in the shot you never have to take at all.